Today on the Morning Edition, an avalanche claims a skier's life. We spoke to experts who remind us of the dangers of avalanche season and some best practices on how to avoid getting stuck in a dangerous situation. Plus, No Kings protests were held not just across Alaska, but across the country. We'll share what they're protesting and what the White House says about the protests. And later, an escaped kangaroo, a kangaroo created quite the stir in an otherwise quiet community, bringing out dozens of volunteers to help look for the guy before something terrible happened. We'll hop to the trail as the Morning Edition starts now. Good Monday morning, everyone. Thanks for waking up with us today. Another Monday, another start to another week. Aaron, what are we looking at weather-wise?
More sunshine. We are really in the, when it comes to the sunshine, we are certainly in that good trend when it comes to our forecast here over the next couple of days. And that slow warming we've been talking about continues to pump in. Those temperatures steadily climbing into the 30s. And we could even see some 40s across parts of South Central as we head through a good portion of this week. And with this morning, we are waking up. Temperatures not as cold. 22 degrees is where we're currently sitting at, with winds remaining fairly light. Now, temperatures today will make an approach at or above freezing for many areas of South Central. We're at 3 degrees in Soldotna, 4 in Willow, and 3 below in Golcana. The rest of South Central seeing those temperatures in the teens and 20s, with a few locations, particularly out towards Seward, where temperatures are already sitting near 30 degrees this morning. Now, compared to this time yesterday, many locations are about 5 to 10 degrees warmer than what we woke up to yesterday morning. And this warming trend will carry us through the rest of this week. And we're still going to stay largely on the quiet side with ample opportunities to get outdoors with this sunshine that we do have in place. Now, with that said, as March draws to a close, we are currently sitting at the coldest March on record at 12.6 degrees is our average temperature. Now, this does not take into account today or tomorrow, but it does look likely that this month will close out as the coldest on record, beating out the previous record, 1959, set back at 13 degrees. Of course, we still have today and tomorrow to watch, but it's certainly going to take some significant warmth to drop us back down into second place. Now, coming up in my full forecast, some areas of South Central will be in the 40s as we head throughout this week. Now, Anchorage does not look to see that. We'll likely stay in the mid-30s, but we will see some parts of South Central touching near 40. We're also going to be seeing areas of the interior making a run near 30, if not freezing later this week, while wet weather continues for areas of southeast as well as southwest Alaska. I'll have more on that in that 7-day forecast for you coming up.
A man has died after heli-skiing guides pulled out of an avalanche Friday near Lake George, which is near Colony Glacier. According to Alaska State Troopers, 63-year-old Eric Summers from California was pronounced dead at an Anchorage area hospital. The avalanche happened around 2 p.m. Friday. Silverton Mountain Guides, which was leading the heli-skiing trip, sent a statement about the avalanche and sending its condolences to the skiers' family and friends. The group was made up of 3 experienced skiers, and they were on a run about a mile east of Lake George that had been skied several times that day. They say Summers triggered the avalanche remotely from about halfway down the run, and it said in part, quote, he was unable to avoid the slide and was caught up in the debris. In addition, the skier was unable to deploy his avalanche airbag. The guides and the other skiers took immediate action to locate the buried skier. Because the skier was wearing a beacon, he was located quickly, and efforts to dig him out began promptly. Once the skier's head was uncovered, life-saving measures began immediately. Now, this was outside of the Chugach National Forest Avalanche Center's forecast area, but Sunday, the center's acting director, Andrew Shower, spoke about the snowpack concerns for the broader Anchorage area. He says the snowpack has been problematic.
There are multiple layers of weak snow that are buried in the upper snowpack, and with a setup like that, it's still possible to trigger an avalanche even though the weather is quiet. So we're not even seeing any melting. There's very little wind and no snow in the forecast. So the weather isn't really suggesting that anything is dangerous, but with that existing setup, it's still possible to trigger an avalanche big enough to have serious consequences.
Shower says he doesn't know what the snowpack looks like for the Lake George avalanche, but he knows that weather patterns have been driving the poor structure he was talking about region-wide.
The avalanches in general that have been triggered are not gigantic. They're big enough to be a concern, but it's not necessarily the case where we're telling people to avoid all avalanche terrain entirely. What we are really encouraging is for people to take a close look at the terrain they're dealing with and avoid anything with what we refer to as terrain traps on the slopes.
Shower says terrain traps can be things like trees, rocks, or cliffs in avalanche runout zones. He says there have been multiple avalanches over the past few weeks, including one last weekend on Max's Mountain near Girdwood, where someone was injured. These are photos of that avalanche. He says the center is not necessarily telling people to stay out of the mountains, but to be really careful with how you use the terrain and to check the avalanche forecast before going out. You can find that every morning on the Chugach National Forest Avalanche Center's website. Demonstrators in over 20 Alaska communities and across the country rallied together Saturday for the third round of No Kings protests. Supporters at the protests say the gatherings are aimed at speaking out against the Trump administration's policies, including war with Iran and immigration crackdowns. Opponents have previously called them, quote, hate rallies. At Town Square Park in Anchorage, thousands turned out with signs and chants.
I fought for our country, and I want to make sure we can keep our country. We are losing democracy. We are losing what America stands for with this current administration. And we are now involved in a senseless, selfish, ignoramus war that nobody asked for.
He is taking away our rights. He's taking control of our media. He's undermining our science, our health care. He's spending over $1 trillion on our military when people are homeless and are worried about their kids' education.
And more than 1,000 people were also out in Fairbanks. A former government worker told us why he showed up.
I'm here today because I've spent the past year and a half, feels like longer now, following the actions of the Trump administration. I've been deeply concerned by a lot of what I've seen. There's been a heavy disregard for the rule of law, steady erosion of human rights. I was a former government employee for several years, and I lost the ability to do the kind of work that I'd been doing for several years because of the actions this administration took. And I wanted to make my voice heard and go out and protest alongside hundreds of other people who share many of my concerns.
The Fairbanks community took the opportunity while more than 1,000 people were gathering for the protest to ask for donations. At the protest, a booth was set up for sock donations to benefit people experiencing homelessness that would go to the Breadline, an anti-hunger organization.
Not only are they down here utilizing their First Amendment rights, being in community with each other, but also helping donate socks specifically to the Breadline because it's cold and it's wet out here, babies, and that is very dangerous for feet. Oftentimes people don't think of socks when it comes to homeless services, but it's one of the most needed items at our soup kitchen or at any place that helps people who are unhoused.
She says donations will still be accepted weekdays from 10 to 2 at the Breadline's office. A political action group in Juneau says about 1,000 people were at the No Kings event there. According to event organizers, the last No Kings rally in October drew out approximately 7 million people nationwide, and their estimates for participation in this weekend's protest, however, hovers right around 8 million. In addition to protests here in the U.S., protests were held in multiple other countries as well to show solidarity and support for the protesting population. Meantime, a White House spokesperson responded to the protests by saying, quote, the only people who care about these Trump derangement therapy sessions are the reporters who are paid to cover them, end quote. And U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who has referred to the protests as, quote, hate America rallies. APD says one person is dead after a standoff that ended in a large house fire and an officer-involved shooting. It happened in South Anchorage off of Shores Circle near Platt and Victor around 3:30 Saturday morning. APD says it was alerted to the situation early in the morning when they received multiple reports of shots fired. Based on preliminary information, APD says the person shot at officers with what was thought to be a high-powered rifle, as well as starting a house fire.
I won't get into details exactly on what the officer thought or observed at the time the officer involved shooting. Again, we don't have that information. We haven't interviewed the officer that was involved. But what I can tell you is that the single officer did fire his weapon, fired 3 to 4 rounds. After firing those 3 to 4 rounds, he observed the subject down inside the residence on the floor.
At this point, right after the officer-involved shooting, APD says the house was fully engulfed in flames.
The efforts turned to keeping personnel safe as well as managing the fire because the fire was so large at the time. So now this became a combined effort between the Anchorage Police Department and the Anchorage Fire Department. Our job was to secure the scene as best we could, knowing that the scene was still an active public safety threat, not knowing the status of the subject inside, and particularly with all the rounds that he had fired.
APD says the subject's exact cause of death is still to be determined and that no officers were injured. APD says all of this information is preliminary and another news conference is expected possibly this week. The Office of Special Prosecution will review the officer's use of force. Per policy, the officer is on a 4-day administrative leave. On our website, you can find more details on what police say happened. And still ahead today on the Morning Edition, it wasn't just the protests that got people out and about on Saturday in Anchorage. The Empty Bowl event was held in the Denina Center and drew a large crowd. We'll share the sights and sounds of the day when we return.
And we're still holding on to some sunshine across South Central. We're also watching those temperatures through the interior, which will continue to climb potentially near or above freezing later this week. I'll have more on that. But first at sunrise, 7:28 in Anchorage, 6:30 in Juneau. Your full forecast is next.
Welcome back in on this Monday morning. Aaron, we're feeling those warmer temperatures and we've got some sunshine in the forecast. Tell us all about it.
Well, we are going to officially see those temperatures this week climb above freezing in South Central. Now, for the interior, we are still awaiting that temperature climbing above freezing. Now, with that said, we have seen a temperature this year with the afternoon high that topped out at freezing. That was on January 16th. The highest temperature we've seen this month, though, is 25 degrees, which was set back on March 25th. And right now, we are comfortably sitting in the second place when it comes to the latest date with highs above freezing. And it does look almost certainly that we are going to break into the #1 spot. Now, with that said, there is a previous record, 1919, that is in the #1 place, but this was set prior to the current forecast or the current climatological record, which is kept at the airport. 1919, it was set back in a different place, but this is the stats for the airport. So it does look almost certainly that we are going to see the coldest start to spring arrive when it comes to that latest first temperature above freezing. Temperatures this morning, 4 below in Fairbanks, 3 degrees in Lost Creek, 12 below in Fort Yukon. So we're seeing those temperatures still sub-zero values, not as cold. And this is that slow warming that has been taking hold across the state. And we are going to see temperatures this week, certainly a lot more improvement considering where we have been. You can see out towards southwest Alaska, 25 degrees. In Bethel, 32 in Cold Bay. We are watching some areas of snow pushing through parts of southwest Alaska. But for many areas of the state, we are continuing to tap into these warmer conditions. You can see through the interior today, we are going to top out in the upper 20s, possibly some locations managing to squeeze out a 30-degree as we head throughout the afternoon. If not today, we will see it through the middle of the week. As far as what we're seeing statewide, though, there is that system that's bringing some light snow accumulation as well as some wintry mix as you head through the Bristol Bay region out towards the Alaska Peninsula. And we've also got some expected rain and snow out towards southeast. But for most of the state, we largely stay quiet. Our jet stream is to our south, so that's going to keep most of the stormy conditions to our south as well, which means more sunshine to be expected across the state as we head through this week. Now, we are in the spring season, and spring tends to be the most extreme season across the state. You can see in Fairbanks, the warmest spring day ever recorded was 90 degrees. The coldest was -56. That's a difference of 146 degrees. So spring is that time of the year where we tend to see wild temperature swings, not only for Fairbanks, but the state as a whole tends to see those wild temperature swings as we're in that battle between winter and spring. And as we've seen so far this season, winter has been winning out, but spring is finally beginning to make an appearance across the state. Now, when it comes to these temperatures here over the next couple of days, again, for the interior, we are going to steadily warm as we begin to make an approach near that freezing mark. Now, as far as what we're going to see as we head through the rest of today, you can see holding on to those chilly mornings, those afternoon highs, managing to top out near freezing. If we don't hit it today in some areas, we will hit it later this week. And you can see the overall forecast as we welcome in April. For the most part, most locations will stay right around seasonal values outside of northwestern parts of the state, which will stay on the warmer side. There is that 7-day forecast, Kristen, looking quite nice as those temperatures touch near freezing into the weekend.
All right, thanks, Aaron. There was a second big event happening in downtown Anchorage on Saturday as well. Hundreds of people were at the Denina Center for the Empty Bowl Project. The event, first held in 1994, raises funds and awareness for those in the community experiencing homelessness and hunger. Those who attended had a chance to buy a handcrafted empty bowl to take home. And with the price of admission, they got another bowl to be filled with as much soup as they wanted from Beans Cafe. To the organizers, the feeling of putting on an event of this magnitude for a good cause never gets old.
I appreciate our community. I appreciate Anchorage. You know, again, the answer to everything is love. And this shows me and proves to me that this is a city of love. And what we do for those that maybe can't have or don't have is absolutely amazing. And whether it's time or whether it's volunteering or even monetarily, this is simply just overwhelmingly great.
And over in Fairbanks, the food bank has been preparing for its Empty Bowl event, which will be taking place this coming Saturday, April 4th, at the Fairbanks Community Food Bank.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. Click subscribe so you can get the latest podcasts from Alaska's news source automatically. And stay up to date with breaking news and in-depth reporting. Available for free 24/7 with the Alaska's news source app.